Hello grade 9s and welcome to this demonstration of how to do Geo News for grade 9 geography. Okay, so first off I'm on the MYP screen and I'm going to go to the Geo News page. Okay. First you should make sure you remember your date that you'll be presenting on, and then there's some guidance on these sheets here to help you figure out what to say during your brief presentations. Okay, so this is the one I'm doing today, right, for this class, and I put in the link to the article that I'm looking at, and I'm going to put in the geo topics later on. This particular topic's about disparity and poverty, things like that. Okay, so I just want to show you the article I'm going to be talking about. It's India's Invisible Catastrophe, Fears Over Spread of COVID-19 into Poor Rural Areas. Okay, and I got this from The Guardian, which is a very good source for these kind of world geography or world news type stories. You could also use CNN or BBC or Vice News. There's many sources that you could be looking at. Okay, so that's up to you to share. So I'm going to start my presentation by telling you a little bit about the article. So it starts off with the personal story of a man who left Delhi to escape the urban center to go back to his rural village where he grew up, as he thought that this would keep him safer from COVID, as the population density was smaller and he thought with less interaction with people he'd be more safe. However, he caught COVID in this small rural village, and it made him think about how unescapable this particular disease is. Then the rest of the article basically details the complexities and the issues with treating COVID in the rural countryside within India compared to the urban centers like Mumbai and Delhi. Right? So there's over 600 million rural Indian people, and only about 25% of them have access to outpatient care, where they can seek treatment and testing for COVID. The top epidemiologist within India believes half of India's rural population will catch COVID, and those with underlying conditions will fail to get treatment, as the families will not rush to hospitals due to both lack of access, so the hospital could be quite far away, and also the cost associated with going to hospitals. There's also this, there was no statistic for it, but it was an anecdotal comment talking about how a lot of people in poor countries or poor situations within India were not wanting to get tested, because then that would prevent them from going to work, and they might be getting paid an hourly wage, and if they don't show up to work they won't get paid. So it's simpler for them to simply not get tested. Okay. Some of the other statistics that stood out to me during the article is that 80% of doctors live in urban areas within India, and over 60% of hospitals are within urban centers. Okay, so if I look at this article from a seat perspective, there's a lot of social impacts here, both on healthcare and the impacts of poverty and disparities within India. There's a lot of political aspects to this article when it comes to funding of these social services like access to healthcare and education around COVID. Okay, there's also very clear economic aspects of this article that stand out, because it's clearly dealing with poverty and disparity within India. What made me really, the way it connects to the course is, there's a lot of ways. This whole article could connect to this course, of course. Movement of people, right? Usually what we see is rural-urban shift, where people from the countryside going to the city, but this particular article is dealing with the opposite, people escaping these urban centers to seek more isolation in the countryside. So we have this movement of people we could be talking about. Also, we have this diffusion of the disease, or how this disease is spreading across a population, which is very interesting to look at. Like, how does it get into these rural centers that are very isolated from other population centers? Also, it's very clearly dealing with different disparity and poverty issues within a country like India. Okay, so this could be a development article as well, looking at how lower income countries or lower middle income countries are dealing with the COVID crisis. What made me interested in this particular article is that COVID is, of course, on the front of all of our minds, but I think one thing that gets underreported is the impacts it's having in LIC, like low income countries or lower middle income countries. Because what gets reported largely are the numbers associated with testing, like how many people were sick yesterday and how many deaths. But a lot of the countries, they're just not testing. So therefore people could be sick and they could be experiencing great impacts, but we just don't know, due to the fact that no one's recording it. Right? So it's nice to see an article that is trying to address those differences, that disparity. Okay, so I have a couple questions. So these would be examples of types of questions that you could ask the class for discussion. So I have 3 here. Why do rural areas receive less attention from governments? How could the stats shown of the number of cases per day influence our understanding of the impacts of COVID globally? And lastly, would you risk getting COVID if you were living in poverty? What might be the consequences of your decision? Being, would you risk going to work if it meant having a chance to catch the COVID virus? Okay, so then you would perhaps be listening to that conversation, and hopefully other questions would come up during that time. So that's about what we were expecting from you guys. So I've been talking here about the article for about 4.5 minutes, and then we'd have about hopefully a 3 or 4 minute discussion with the class concerning the article. Hopefully that's helpful, and I hope you're enjoying geography in grade 9. Bye now.